On the 14th of March, 1853, in a parish courthouse somewhere along the Mississippi River in Louisiana, a deal was made that would be left out of official auction records for more than 100 years. A woman who was pregnant was sold for $12. The price of a loaf of bread is not $12, but 12 cents. 7 men signed the deed of sale, which proves that the sale was legal. But the woman's name was never written down in any parish records, either before or after that day. In 1897, local historians found the receipt sealed inside a wall during renovations to the courthouse. They buried it again right away. They chose to keep quiet instead of telling the truth because of what they found written on the back of the receipt. Tonight, we tell you what was hidden and why the descendants of the 7 witnesses tried for generations to make sure this story died with them. Before we go on with the story of what happened in that Louisiana courthouse, I need you to do something. Please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. Stories like this one, stories they tried to hide, need to be told. And I want to know where you are right now. Please leave your city or state in the comments. Let's find out how far these hidden stories go. That March morning's transaction wasn't a one-time thing that happened because of chaos or confusion. It was planned, thought out, and completely legal under Louisiana law before the Civil War tore the country apart. Street. Helena Parish in 1853 was a place where Spanish moss grew so thick on the live oaks that it was hard for the sun to reach the ground. The air tasted like river silt and sugarcane smoke, and the land's wealth was measured in people, not acres. The parish was located in the Fertile Crescent between Baton Rouge and the Mississippi border. It was close enough to the river to thrive, and far enough away to keep its secrets. Greensburg was the parish seat. It had a courthouse square in the middle of a group of whitewashed buildings, and business was done there like it was a church service. The steps of the courthouse became an auction block every Saturday. Bureaucracy worked just as well for moving furniture, livestock, land, and people. The auctioneers knew what they were doing. The buyers knew what they could afford. And everyone knew that what happened on those steps was legal, customary, and enforced by men who thought they were the creators of civilization itself. In the spring of that year, 3 men had a lot of power in Street Helena Parish. Judge Amos Crenshaw was in charge of the district court and had the power of Scripture. He had spent the last 40 years, at the age of 62, interpreting laws that were meant to protect property above all else. His choices changed the parish like a river changes its banks, slowly, without fail, and with a force that seemed like nature itself. Duncan Fairholm, a plantation owner whose family had owned over 4,000 acres of prime cotton land since Louisiana became a state, was less influential than him but just as ambitious. Fairholm was 47 years old, went to school in Charleston, spoke French fluently, and was cutthroat in business. Silas Guthrie was the overseer of his plantation, Bellamont. His reputation for being cruel kept the enslaved people in line through fear alone. Nathaniel Pouet, the parish tax assessor and recorder of deeds, was the 3rd man in this group of powerful people. Pouet was younger, only 39, and wanted to be important in a society where family name meant everything and his name meant nothing. He had come to Louisiana from Virginia with fake letters of introduction and the idea that, in the chaos of westward expansion, a man could start over if he was willing to do what others wouldn't. On the morning of March 14, these 3 men crossed paths because of a woman whose existence had been carefully erased from all of their records. Clara was her name. She was born about 23 years ago on a tobacco plantation in Virginia. The word approximately is important here, because enslaved people often didn't get the respect of having their birth dates written down. She was sold to someone in the South when she was 15. It was a Tuesday morning in late summer, and she was separated from her mother and 2 younger siblings at an auction house in Richmond. Edmund Fairholm, Duncan's father, bought her. He died of cholera in 1849 and left his son his entire estate, which included 47 people. Clara was employed in the main house at Bellamont. She was good with numbers, could read even though it was against the law, and had a quiet dignity that Duncan Fairholm first noticed, then hated, and then tried to destroy. Clara got pregnant in October 1852. She never said the father's name out loud because she didn't have to. Everyone in the big house knew. The women who were slaves and worked with her knew. Margaret, Duncan, Fairholm's wife, knew. And Duncan knew for sure, which made him so angry that he could barely look at Clara without shaking his hands. The father was not Duncan. William, his younger brother. Duncan wasn't anything like William Fairholme. William laughed easily, but Duncan was strict. Duncan thought of people as investments in farming, but William saw the system he benefited from as fundamentally evil and didn't have the guts to fight it. He was 28 years old, single, and lived in the overseer's cottage on the edge of Bellamont's property. He was supposed to be in charge of the northern fields, but he mostly drank and read abolitionist books that he had smuggled from New Orleans. At first, he and Clara just talked. Twice a day, she brought food to the cottage. He asked her about her life before Bellamont. At first, she was careful with her answers. Then, as she realized he listened differently than other white men, she became more honest. Over time, talking changed into something else, something that broke down all the barriers their world had set up. When Clara's pregnancy started to show in late December, William did something he had never done before. He went to his brother and offered to buy Clara's freedom. On a Saturday night, the talk took place in Duncan's study. There is no written record of what was said, but what happened next was recorded with great care. Duncan said no to the offer. Not only did he refuse, but he was also offended by it. He thought that William had broken the sacredness of property rights, put the racial hierarchy that their whole society depended on in danger, and embarrassed the Fairholme name in a way that could ruin their reputation if it got out. William said that he loved Clara, that the child was his, and that they should be able to go north to a free state to start a new life that Louisiana law couldn't touch. Duncan's answer was to sell Clara right away, not to a slave trader who could take her far away where William would never find her. That would be too easy and kind. Duncan wanted his brother to see, hear, and understand what Duncan called his betrayal. He set up for Clara to be part of a public auction on March 14th, which is when property that has been seized for unpaid debts is sold. The steps to the courthouse. In full view of the public. It's perfectly legal. But Duncan added a condition that showed how cruel he was. He made Clara's lowest bid 12 cents. The amount was planned. In Louisiana in 1853, the average price for a woman who was enslaved and able to have children was between $800 and $1,200. Duncan reached several goals at once by setting the price at 12. He showed that Clara meant nothing to him. He made William feel bad by showing that the woman he said he loved was worth less than a newspaper. And, most cleverly, he made sure that no real buyer would bid, since, in the slave trade, price was a sign of quality. A woman who is for sale for 12 cents must be sick, broken, or not fit for work. No plantation owner would put even a little bit of money into something that was so clearly trash. Duncan knew that only one person would make a bid. He didn't want to sell Clara to a stranger. He wanted to sell her to someone who would make sure she kept suffering in ways that William couldn't stop. He was selling her to Silas Guthrie, who was in charge of him. William Fairholme went missing the night before the auction. He didn't leave a note or take a horse. He just walked away from Bellamont after midnight and was never seen in Street Helena Parish again. Some people said he went north to help the abolitionist movements in Boston. Some people said he killed himself by jumping into the Mississippi River because he couldn't handle being powerless. Some people whispered that Duncan had him killed and buried in the cane fields, where dozens of enslaved people were already buried in unmarked graves. The truth was both simpler and more troubling at the same time. William had gone to Judge Crenshaw's house before dawn and offered him everything he owned, about $3,000 in inheritance and land rights, for one favor. He wanted the judge to void the sale and say it was illegal for some technical reason, giving William time to find another way out. Judge Crenshaw looked like a man watching a child explain why the sky should be green instead of blue when William made his case. The judge asked William one question after he was done. "Did your brother sign the right deed of sale?" William said yes. "Then the deal is legal," Crenshaw said. "Your grief does not override property law. Good evening, Mr. Fairholme." William left that house knowing that every powerful man, law, and institution in the parish would support Duncan. Not because they were mean, though many were, but because letting William's feelings take precedence over Duncan's property rights would put the whole economy at risk. The system would fall apart if love could take over ownership. Clara spent her last night at Bellamont in the quarters, where women braided her hair and sang songs that were older than Louisiana, older than America. Songs that were brought over from Africa in the bellies of ships. They knew they probably wouldn't see her again. They knew what men like Silas Guthrie did to the women they owned. Bethy, an old cook who had been a slave for 50 years, gave Clara a small cloth bundle. There was a knife inside that was only a little longer than Clara's hand and was wrapped in oilcloth. Bethy whispered, "You hide this. You hide it well. And when the time comes, you do what needs to be done." Clara nodded her head. She got it. The knife wasn't for protecting oneself. It was for mercy, for her child if things got too bad, and for herself if there was no other way out. That night, she sewed it into the hem of her dress. Her hands were steady, even though she was scared, and the taste of copper was in her mouth. The auction started at 10 in the morning, and the sky was so gray that it looked like it was reflecting the moral character of everything that was going on below. Around 40 people came together in the courthouse square. Most of them were there to buy furniture and animals. Some people came just to buy people. Nathaniel Pouet stood on the steps of the courthouse, reading the deed of sale out loud, so that everyone in the square could hear him. He talked about Clara in the same way he talked about a lame horse. Female, about 23 years old, trained to use the bathroom, can read and write, but that skill isn't very useful. Currently pregnant. Minimum bid, 12 cents. There was a murmur in the crowd. 12 cents? This one was off. A number of men who were ready to bid right away lost interest. Why put money into property that is clearly broken? Silas Guthrie was near the front, his hat pulled low, and his face was hard to read. He was waiting for the crowd to leave, and for the time when no one else would bid. Then he could buy Clara for the small amount of money that Duncan had arranged, and she would be his to do with as he pleased. But something that wasn't expected happened. A man in the back of the crowd raised his hand. 12 cents, he yelled. Everyone looked. The man was a stranger. He was tall and thin, and he wore a traveler's coat that was dusty from the road. His face looked like it had been weathered by years of working outside, but his posture was all wrong for a field worker. He stood too straight and looked people in the eye too directly. Nathaniel Pouet thought for a moment. "Are you bidding 12 cents for this property?" "Yes." "What is your name, sir?" "Isaiah Mercer." Pouet looked over at Silas Guthrie, who was staring at the stranger with a look of real confusion. This wasn't part of the plan. Duncan had set it up so that Guthrie would be the only one to bid. Who was this guy? "Mr. Mercer, do you have 12 cents? Isaiah Mercer walked up the steps, pulled out 12 copper pennies from his pocket, and put them on the podium where Pouet was standing. "I do." Judge Crenshaw watched this conversation with more and more interest from his spot near the courthouse door. He had gone to the auction to make sure Duncan's plan went off without a hitch, but now there was something he didn't know that had changed things. Pouet looked at Silas Guthrie with a look of desperation. The overseer had a red face. He knew what was going on. If he offered 13 cents, it would show that he was interested. He would tell everyone about what was supposed to be a private deal. Duncan had told him to wait until no one else bid so that it would look like he was doing Bellamont a favor by taking their worthless property off their hands. If he didn't bid, though, Clara would go to this stranger. The seconds dragged on. The people in the crowd waited. In the end, Silas Guthrie spoke. 13 cents. Isaiah Mercer didn't think twice. 25 cents. 50 cents. Guthrie said angrily. $1. Now the crowd was paying attention. This wasn't how these auctions usually went. Two men were bidding against each other for a woman who was being sold at a very low price. What did they know that no one else did? Silas Guthrie offered $2. Isaiah Mercer put in $5. Guthrie stopped at $10. Not because he didn't have enough money, but because Duncan had told him not to pay too much or draw attention to himself. The whole point was to get Clara without anyone noticing, so it wouldn't seem like a big deal. But it was no longer small. $10 once? Nathaniel Pouet yelled, his voice shaky. 2 times $10? He waited for Judge Crenshaw to tell him what to do. The judge nodded a little. $10 paid to Mr. Isaiah Mercer. Clara, who had been standing to the side of the courthouse steps with her hands tied in front of her and her pregnancy showing through the thin dress she was wearing, looked at the man who had just bought her. Isaiah Mercer looked at her, and even though his face didn't change, Clara saw something in his eyes that made her heart stop. Recognition. It took only a few minutes to sign the deed of sale. Isaiah Mercer counted out $10 in coins and put them carefully on Puig's desk. Judge Crenshaw signed the deal as a witness. Clara was now legally the property of a man she had never met before that morning, but the sale's irregularity had caught people's attention. Mercer took Clara away from the courthouse and quickly walked her to a wagon waiting at the edge of the square. Duncan Fairholme came out of the courthouse, where he had been watching through a window. "Mr. Mercer," Duncan yelled. His voice was sharp because he was used to being obeyed. "Please give me a moment." Isaiah Mercer stopped. When he turned to face Duncan, he didn't let go of Clara's arm. He had a carefully neutral look on his face. "Mr. Fairholme, you don't live in this parish." "I don't. What brings you to Street Helena?" "Business." Duncan moved a little closer. He was trying to figure out who this man was and what had just happened. The auction was supposed to be organized and easy to understand. This result was neither. "What kind of business?" Mercer asked. "My own kind," he said. His voice was low but strong. The judge saw the transaction, so it was legal. Unless you have a problem with the sale, it was a question that was meant to be a challenge. Duncan knew it right away. He would have to give reasons if he disagreed. And what reasons could he give? That he had purposely made Clara seem less valuable to make his brother look bad? That he had set up for his overseer to buy her for reasons that Duncan didn't want to talk about in public? "No objection," Duncan said slowly. "Though I am curious. What do you intend to do with property you purchased for such a price?" "That is my business, Mr. Fairholme. Good day." Isaiah Mercer turned around and walked toward the wagon again. Clara walked next to him, her mind racing. This didn't make any sense. He had bid against Silas Guthrie and paid $10, which was a lot of money for a woman being sold as trash. And when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that scared her more than anything that had happened in the past 4 months. He knew who she was. Not just her name or her situation. He knew her. They got to the wagon, which was just a simple farm cart with a canvas top. Mercer helped her get into the back. His touch was impersonal, but not rough. After that, he got on the driver's bench, took the reins, and pushed the horse forward. They rode through Greensburg in silence, past the shops and homes, the church with its white steeple, and the line where cultivated land turned into pine forest. Isaiah Mercer didn't say anything until they were far away from the town. "Clara, you don't remember me?" Clara's voice was careful. "Should I?" "Richmond, August 1845. You were 15 years old. I was there the day you were sold. Clara's blood went cold. You were at the auction?" Mercer kept his eyes on the road. "I worked for a man named Ephraim Dalton, a slave trader. I drove his wagons and took care of his property. I saw you and your family stand on that block. I saw your mother scream when they took you away. I saw Edmund Fairholme pay $700 and take you away. Then you are no different than the rest of them," Clara said, her voice hard. Mercer said, "I was no different. I am not that man anymore." He pulled a folded piece of paper out of his coat. He gave it back to Clara without looking away from the road. "Read it." Clara opened the paper with hands that were shaking. It was a manumission deed, a paper that, if signed and filed correctly, would free a slave. Her name was Clara, and it was on the paper. She didn't have a last name because she had never been given one, but her age and the scar on her left forearm from a burn she got as a child matched what she said. There was a place at the bottom of the document where it wasn't signed. For the owner's signature, Isaiah Mercer's signature. "I don't get it," Clara said quietly. 8 years ago, I saw your family fall apart at an auction," Mercer said. He spoke steadily, but there was something else going on, maybe shame or sadness, or both. I told myself I was only doing my job and that I wasn't in charge of the system. I was just a small part of a big machine. But one night in New Orleans, I saw Ephraim Dalton beat a man to death over $5. I watched him do it slowly, and I realized that everyone who takes part, no matter how small their role, makes the machine work. So, I left. I went north and worked with people who were trying to tear down what I had helped build. He stopped for a moment to steer the wagon around a fallen branch. 3 months ago, a man named William Fairholm came to a meeting in Cincinnati. He told us about a woman in Louisiana who was pregnant with his child. He said his brother was going to sell her to a brutal overseer. He gave us the date and place of the auction and asked if anyone could help. Clara's hand went to her stomach without her thinking about it. "William sent you?" Mercer said. "He paid me, not to buy you. He paid me to take you and your child to a safe house in Illinois, where you can be free." Clara looked at the deed in her hands. Being free. The word sounded strange and impossible, like a promise that had been used against enslaved people for so long that she didn't believe it anymore. "Where is William now?" she asked. Before he spoke, Mercer's silence spoke for him. 2 weeks ago, he died. They said it was fever. He was in Kentucky, trying to help others get there. The people I work with think it might not have been fever. They think someone from Louisiana found him. Clara shut her eyes. William, who was reckless and idealistic, had read her poetry and made promises that could never come true. William, who had at least tried, which was more than most men in his situation would ever do. She said Duncan had him killed. There was no question. We can't prove it, but yes, I do believe that. We thought the worst of this story was over and that Clara might finally be free, but the real horror of what happened in Street Helena Parish is about to come out. If this story scares you, send this video to a friend who likes dark mysteries. If you like what we do, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Let's find out together what happens next. The wagon kept going north through the afternoon, following roads that got rougher and more isolated. Mercer told them what path they would take. They would stay off the main roads, travel mostly at night, and stay in safe houses run by free black families and white people who were sympathetic to their cause. It would take weeks to get to Illinois and months before Clara would be safe. But there was something wrong. Clara couldn't say exactly what it was, but years of living had taught her to trust her gut, and her gut told her that Isaiah Mercer was lying, not all of it. It's possible that his story about Richmond is true. He might really be ashamed, but this rescue seemed like it was staged, like he was following a script written by someone else. She thought about the auction, how perfectly timed Mercer's arrival had been, how he had known exactly when and where to bid, and how easily he had outsmarted Silas Guthrie. Too simple. Duncan Fairholm didn't make any mistakes. He planned everything with the same level of detail as a general sending troops into battle. Clara would have gone to Guthrie if he had wanted her to. Unless Duncan wanted something else to happen. It hit Clara like ice water. This wasn't a rescue. It was a hunt. That night, they set up camp in a clearing a few miles from the nearest settlement. It was deep enough in the woods that the light of the fire wouldn't be seen from the road. Mercer made a small fire and gave Clara cornbread and dried meat. She ate without thinking, her mind going through all the options. Duncan could have killed her at Bellamont, if he wanted to. Easy. Be quiet. Women who were slaves went missing all the time, and no one asked why. But Duncan didn't want her to die. He wanted to kill William completely, but William was already gone and out of Duncan's reach. Duncan needed something else, then. He needed proof that William's betrayal had real effects. He wanted the child Clara was carrying to suffer, and he wanted it to be William's fault. The plan for the escape was to fail. Mercer wasn't saving Clara, he was taking her to something worse than Silas Guthrie. They would be stopped at some point along this route. People who catch slaves, most likely. Men who would say Clara had run away. The sale would be called a fraud. Clara would be sent back to Duncan in a way that would make it seem like justice instead of cruelty. William had planned this escape, paid for it, and gotten abolitionists involved in a plot to steal property. This meant that Duncan could say that his brother had caused Clara's pain and that William's feelings had made things worse, not better. It was the best way to get back at someone. The only thing left to know was when the trap would go off. Clara waited until Mercer was on the other side of the fire, with his back against a tree and his hat pulled down. She waited until he started to breathe more deeply. Then she carefully pulled the knife that Bethy had given her out of the hem of her dress. The knife was small but very sharp. She put her thumb on the edge and felt it bite. She could kill him while he slept, right now. It would be simple. But what happens next? She was alone in a Louisiana forest, pregnant, without money, a map, or friends. She would be caught within days, even if she got to a road. If a black woman who was pregnant was traveling alone, she would be stopped, questioned, and sent back to whoever said they owned her. The knife wasn't the answer, but maybe being honest was. Clara said softly, "I know this isn't real." For a few seconds, Mercer didn't move. She thought he might be asleep for real. After that, he pushed his hat back and looked at her over the fire. "Explain." "Duncan planned this. He wanted me to try to escape. He wanted it to fail." "You are part of that plan." Mercer didn't change his expression. "Why would I agree to such a plan?" "Maybe money. Or safety." "Duncan threatened to tell you that you were helping runaways." "Maybe he offered you more money than William did. I don't know why, but I know this isn't what you said it was." The fire crackled as they stood there. An owl called out in the dark. Isaiah Mercer spoke last. "William didn't give you enough credit for how smart you are." Clara's grip on the knife got tighter. "So I'm right." "Partially." Mercer leaned forward and put his elbows on his knees. "Yes, Duncan knows about this escape. Yes, he planned for it to fail. But you are wrong about why I am helping him." "Then why?" "Because if I didn't, someone else would, and that someone else would deliver you directly to slave catchers who would hurt you in ways I will not describe. Duncan gave me a choice. Lead you north and let his men intercept us in a way that leaves you physically unharmed, or refuse and watch him give the job to men who would make you wish you had never been born." Clara laughed in a way that made her sound angry. "So you chose the merciful betrayal." "I chose to give you a chance." "What chance?" "You just said, 'We will be intercepted.'" "We will be. Tomorrow afternoon, approximately 20 miles north of here, 4 men will be waiting on the road. They will have papers declaring you a fugitive. They will have authorization from Judge Crenshaw to return you to Bellamont, and legally they will be completely within their rights. Then I have no chance." "You have exactly one chance," Mercer said. He pulled out a leather pouch from his saddlebag. He threw it over the fire to Clara. "That pouch has $150 in it, and a letter of introduction to a family in Natchez, free people of color, who can help you disappear. Not north. North is where Duncan thinks you should run. But south to New Orleans, then by ship to Mexico. It's a longer, more dangerous route, but it's possible." Clara opened the bag. The cash was real. The letter was real. "Why would you do this?" "I meant what I said before. I'm not the same man I was in Richmond. And William Fairholme, for all his flaws, tried to do something good. I won't let Duncan Fairholme use that goodness as a weapon. But you're still going to betray me. You're still going to let Duncan's men catch us." "They're going to catch someone," Mercer said. "It doesn't have to be you." He got up and walked to the back of the wagon. He came back with a bundle of clothes, including women's clothes, a dress that was bigger than Clara's, a shawl, and a bonnet. "There is a settlement 8 miles south of here. It's a small place with mostly free black families and poor whites. There is a woman there named Ruth Chambers. She is about your height and skin color, and she is dying of consumption. She has only a few weeks left. I talked to her yesterday and gave her family $50 to help us." Clara stared at him. "I don't get it." "Tomorrow morning, take this money and these clothes and walk south to the settlement. Tell the Chambers family that Isaiah sent you. They will hide you until the men looking for you leave the area, and then they will help you get to Natchez. After that, follow the letter's instructions. Ruth Chambers will take your place in this wagon. She is too sick to walk more than a few steps, but she can sit upright in a bonnet and shawl. From a distance, she will look enough like you. When Duncan's men catch up with us tomorrow, they will take her. By the time they realize their mistake, You will be gone. Clara's head was spinning. Ruth will die. Ruth is already dying, and her family needs money to bury her properly and take care of her kids. This way, her death serves a purpose. This is crazy. This is your only chance, Mercer said flatly. Duncan has men watching every way north. He has money, power, and the law on his side. You can't fight him head on. You can only disappear so completely that he can't find you. Clara looked at the knife in her hand, then at the money, and then at Isaiah Mercer, whose face was half in the firelight. If I do this, if I run, Duncan will know you helped me. He will come after you. He will try, Mercer said. But I'm harder to catch than you are, and I have friends who can make me go away too. Why? Clara asked. The word came out wrong. Why would you take this chance for me? For a long time, Mercer didn't say anything. His voice was softer than it had been all day when he spoke. You didn't scream or fight when they took you away from your mother in Richmond. You stood on that block and looked at the men bidding on you with an expression that said you knew exactly who they were and what they could do. You were 15 years old and had more dignity than any of them would ever have. I've seen that expression in my dreams for 8 years. It's time I did something to earn the right to forget it. Clara felt tears welling up behind her eyes, but she wouldn't let them fall. Women who were slaves couldn't afford to cry. People thought that crying showed weakness, submission, and that they had accepted their situation. She had learned early on to keep her sadness to herself and let it harden into something stronger. Mercer went on, There's something else you should know. It sounded like the forest itself might be listening when he spoke. About Duncan Fairholme. What about him? William told us things before he died. Things about his brother and Bellamont. Mercer stopped to think about what to say. You weren't the first. Clara's heart stopped. The first what? The first woman Duncan sold to Silas Guthrie. There were 3 others over the past 5 years. All of them housed servants. All of them young. Duncan would arrange some minor infraction, some excuse to remove them from the main house. Then he would sell them to Guthrie at auction. Always for suspiciously low prices, always legally documented, always witnessed by Judge Crenshaw. What happened to them? 2 of them died within a year. One died from injuries that Guthrie said were accidental, and the other died from what was called fever. The enslaved people at Bellamont said she had been beaten so badly that she never got better. The 3rd woman, Sarah, disappeared completely. Guthrie said she ran away, but no one ever saw her again. Clara thought of Bethy, the old cook who had given her the knife. Bethy would have known these women and seen them disappear one by one. She would have known exactly what would happen to Clara if she ended up in Guthrie's hands. Clara asked, why would Duncan do this? But she thought she already knew the answer. Because he could, Mercer said without going into detail. Because the law gave him complete control over the people he owned, and complete control shows what men really are. Duncan Fairholme is a man who enjoys making other people suffer, especially women who show intelligence, dignity, or any other quality that threatens his sense of superiority. And Judge Crenshaw let this happen? Judge Crenshaw let it happen. Every sale was legal. Every transfer of property was properly documented. The judge never asked why these women were being sold so cheaply, or questioned the pattern. He just signed the papers and collected his fees. Clara stared at the knife in her hand. 3 women before her had all been killed in the same way, and they were all gone from history as if they had never existed. William knew about this? He found out about it about a year ago when he found records in Duncan's study. That's when he started reading abolitionist literature and realized that the problem was the system itself, not just the cruelty of individuals within it. He tried to get Duncan to free the enslaved people at Bellamont and even offered to give up his own inheritance if Duncan would do it. Duncan laughed at him. Mercer added another branch to the fire. When you got pregnant, William saw it as his chance to do something good and save at least one person from the machine. He got in touch with abolitionists in Cincinnati, gave them all his money, and made plans for your escape. But Duncan found out. We think someone in Cincinnati betrayed us, someone who sold information to slave catchers who then sold it to Duncan. By the time William realized the escape plan was compromised, it was too late. Duncan had already changed the whole auction to make sure you ended up exactly where he wanted you. Why did William go to Kentucky if he knew the plan had failed? Mercer said, his jaw tightening. Because he was looking for another way. He thought that if he could get messages to conductors who worked in Louisiana and reach the Underground Railroad network, he could set up a second rescue that Duncan wouldn't see coming. But Duncan found him first. Duncan's reach is longer than any of us knew. He knows slave catchers in 5 states, men who make their living hunting people. When William started asking questions in Kentucky, someone told the police. 3 days later, William was dead. Clara took her time taking in this information. William, who was foolish and idealistic, had tried, really tried. He kept trying even after his first plan didn't work, which is even more impressive. That had to mean something, even if it didn't do anything in the end. The fever, they said, killed him. Clara asked, "What really happened?" "We will never know for certain. His body was found in a boarding house in Louisville. The proprietor said William had been sick for 2 days, complained of stomach pain, vomiting, died in his sleep. But one of the abolitionists who saw the body afterward said William's fingernails were blue, his lips were discolored. Those are signs of poisoning, not fever. Duncan poisoned his own brother, or paid someone to do it. Either way, William became a problem Duncan needed to eliminate. And Duncan is very good at eliminating problems, while keeping his own hands clean. Clara thought about this. A man so desperate for power that he would kill his own family member, and a system that gave such men power, and called it civilization. Clara said slowly, "If Duncan could kill William and make it look like an accident, then he could kill you too. Do you understand that?" "Yes. This plan you have to send me south while Ruth takes my place will only work if Duncan believes you were really trying to help me escape. If he thinks you did it on purpose, you will die." "I know. Then why take the chance?" Mercer looked her in the eye. "I don't want to be the one who looks away anymore. I'm tired of telling myself that I'm just following orders, doing my job, and trying to survive in a system I didn't make. Every person who makes that excuse and puts their own safety ahead of someone else's suffering makes the system stronger. I can't end slavery by myself, but I can save one person. I can do one thing that matters." Clara realized that it was the same logic that had driven William, the same beautiful but useless logic that got idealistic people killed, but it was the only way of thinking that ever made a difference. Clara had made up her mind. "I will go south," she said. "But first, I need to know something. How did you find the Chambers family? How did you set this up? I've been traveling through Louisiana for 3 months to get ready for your escape. I made connections in a few communities and offered money to families who might be willing to help. The Chambers family was one of 3 who agreed." "3 families? You planned multiple escape routes?" "I planned for contingencies. Duncan is not the only one who can think several moves ahead." There was a change in Clara. This man, a stranger who had helped destroy her family 8 years ago, had spent 3 months getting ready to save her. He had put his life on the line to make options and had thought through scenarios and backup plans with the same level of care that Duncan used to plan his cruel acts. Maybe redemption wasn't just one big act of kindness. Maybe it was the slow, careful process of changing into someone else. Clara asked, "What about Ruth? What will Duncan's men do to her when they find out they have the wrong woman?" Mercer said, "Nothing. By the time they find out about the switch, she will already be dead. Ruth will probably be unconscious or delirious from fever. They can't torture someone who is that far gone, and they can't prove she willingly took part in a lie. For all anyone knows, I made an honest mistake. I thought Ruth was you." Duncan won't accept that explanation. Duncan doesn't have to accept it. He just has to admit that he can't prove otherwise. And even Duncan Fairholm has limits to what he can do in public without proof. Clara wasn't completely sure, but she didn't have any other options. She thought about Ruth Chambers, a woman she had never met, who was giving up her last days to give Clara a chance to be free. It was a debt that could never be paid back. Clara said, "I want to meet her. Before I go, I want to thank her." "That's not a good idea. The less you know about each other, the safer you both are." "I don't care about safe." Clara said, her voice harder than she meant it to be. A woman is dying for me. The least I can do is look her in the eye and tell her I won't waste what she is giving me. For a long time, Mercer looked at her. After that, he nodded. We'll stop at the settlement in the morning. You have 15 minutes. No more. They got to the Chambers settlement just after dawn. It wasn't really a town. It was more like a group of cabins around a common well. There were about 30 people living there, mostly free black families and a few white families who were too poor to care about racial hierarchies. The kind of place that wasn't on any official maps, that was in the spaces between parishes, and that stayed alive by being hidden from people who might want to destroy it. Ruth Chambers lived in the smallest cabin on the edge of the settlement. 2 years before, her husband had died in a logging accident. Her 3 children, who were between the ages of 4 and 12, were being looked after by neighbors, while their mother spent her last days in relative peace. Relative, because consumption didn't let people die peacefully. It slowly hollowed you out, turned your lungs into useless meat, and made every breath a fight you knew you would lose. Mercer followed Clara into the cabin. There was only one window covered with oiled paper that let in light, so the inside was dark. The air smelled like sickness and sage, which was burned to try to cover up the sickness. Ruth was lying on a small bed against the wall. Her body was so thin that the blanket covering her barely moved. Her skin had a grayish tint that made her look like her organs were failing. But when she looked at Clara, her eyes were clear. Ruth said, "You are the one." She barely spoke. "I am Clara. They told me you were worth saving, and I wanted to see if that was true." Clara moved closer to the bed. "I don't know if I'm worth what you're giving," Ruth said. "Nobody is worth a life. But that's not why I said yes to help you. I said yes because my kids need what Mr. Mercer paid. I'm dying anyway, and if I have to die, I'd rather do something that matters." "Your kids," Clara said. "What will happen to them? My sister will take them. The money Mr. Mercer gave us will be enough to feed them through the winter, and maybe even enough to buy a small piece of land where they can grow their own food. It's more than I could have given them otherwise." Clara's eyes were burning with tears again. She knelt down next to the bed and took Ruth's hand. The bones felt like bird bones, light and weak. Clara said, "I will remember you. I'll tell my child about you and what you did. Your name will live on." Ruth smiled weakly. "Names don't mean much to me where I'm going, but if it makes you feel better to remember, then do. Just make sure you live. Make sure that baby lives. Don't let me trade my death for nothing." "I will live," Clara promised. "Whatever it takes." "Good." Ruth's eyes closed. "Now go, Mr. Mercer will tell you what to do next. Don't look back. Looking back only makes it harder to leave." Clara squeezed Ruth's hand again and then stood up. Ruth said something else as she turned toward the door. "One more thing. When they take me tomorrow, Duncan Fairholm's men will be angry when they realize I'm not you. They might say mean things or threaten me, but they won't hurt me. I'll make sure of that." "How?" Ruth opened her eyes again. They were gone. There was something in them now that was fierce, even though her body was weak. "Because I'll be dead by then." Clara stopped. "What do you mean?" Mercer moved forward. "Ruth and I talked about this. The timing has to be just right. If she dies during the interception, before Duncan's men can question her, they won't have any power. They won't be able to prove she lied or punish anyone. All they can do is say they failed." Clara asked, "You are planning to die at the exact right time." "I plan to die on my own terms," Ruth said. "Consumption will kill me in a few weeks anyway. This way, I can choose when and how." "This way. My death has a purpose, instead of just being another tragedy." At that point, Clara got it. Ruth had medicine that the doctor at the settlement had given her, probably laudanum or morphine, to help her feel better in her last days. And she was going to take too much of it on purpose so that she would die during the interception, which would ruin Duncan's whole plan. It was both great and awful at the same time. "You've thought of everything," Clara said softly. Ruth said, "No, Mr. Mercer thought of everything. I'm just going along with it. Now go, before I start coughing again and ruin this dramatic moment. Clara wanted to say more. She wanted to explain that she knew how big of a deal what Ruth was doing was, that she would have to deal with this debt for the rest of her life, and that she would make sure Ruth's kids knew their mother died a hero. But Ruth's eyes were closed again. Her breathing was shallow and hard, and Mercer was already at the door, telling Clara to come with him. That's why she left. She left the dark cabin, knowing she would never see Ruth Chambers again. She knew that the woman lying on the bed would be dead in 2 days, having died so that Clara could live. The morning sun was already warming the air outside. Mercer gave Clara the leather pouch with the money and the letter of introduction. He said, "There is a path behind this cabin that goes south through the woods. Follow it for about 3 miles. It will take you to a road. Go west on the road until you reach a tavern called the Black Swan. Marcus is the owner. Tell him Isaiah sent you, and he will know what to do next. And then? And then, you follow the letter's instructions. Don't trust anyone who doesn't use the passwords in the letter. Only move at night. Stay off main roads. And the promise? Get to Natchez. Get on a ship. Get to Mexico. Disappear so completely that Duncan Fairholme spends the rest of his life wondering what happened to you." Clara nodded. She moved the bundle of clothes under her arm and felt the weight of the money pouch. She asked, "What about you?" "I'll keep going north with Ruth. I'll take her to Duncan's men, and then I'll disappear too. He'll hunt you. Let him try," Mercer said with a grim smile. "I've been running away from things my whole life. I'm really good at it." Clara wanted to thank him and say something deep about second chances, redemption, and the chance to change. But words didn't seem enough. So she did something surprising instead. She hugged him. Mercer stiffened, clearly not expecting to be touched. Then he slowly and carefully returned the hug. "Thanks," Clara said in a low voice. "Survive," Mercer said. "That's all the thanks I need." They broke up. Clara turned in the direction of the path that Ruth had pointed out. She didn't look back. It was harder to leave when I thought about it. Isaiah Mercer watched her until she was gone from view behind the trees. He then went back to the cabin where Ruth Chambers was dying. There, a plan had been made that would either save Clara's life or kill everyone involved. In the next 24 hours, we would know which. Clara left before dawn, carrying the leather pouch and a bundle of clothes over her arm. Mercer saw her leave, a dark shape against the gray light of dawn, and then he turned to hitch the wagon. When the sun came up, Ruth Chambers was sitting in the back of the wagon, her face hidden by the bonnet and her body wrapped in Clara's shawl. Mercer had made a pregnancy pillow out of rags and tied it around her waist. It looked almost real because she was so thin. They went north all morning. Ruth didn't say anything because the consumption had taken most of her voice weeks ago. She just sat there, swaying with the wagon, and it was hard for her to breathe. Around 2 in the afternoon, 4 men on horseback came into view on the road ahead. They were exactly what Mercer said they would be. Tough guys with guns who knew the law and would never question what they did. Porter, the leader, walked up to the wagon with papers in his hand. "Isaiah Mercer, yes? We have a warrant for the return of fugitive property, a black woman named Clara, who ran away from Bellamont Plantation. We think you have her." Mercer said, "I bought that woman legally. I have the deed of sale. The deed was gotten under false pretenses. Judge Crenshaw has voided the transaction. The woman should be returned to her rightful owner." Porter went to the back of the wagon. He moved the canvas covering to the side. Ruth Chambers looked up at him with fever-bright eyes that were already halfway to another world. Porter asked, "Is this her?" One of his friends rode up closer to look at Ruth's face. "It's hard to tell with the bonnet. Make her stand up. She is sick," Mercer said. "I didn't ask." "Stand her up." Mercer. "Stand her up." Mercer got into the back of the wagon. He helped Ruth up slowly. She swayed and almost fell. The shawl moved a little bit over the pregnancy pillow. Porter's eyes got smaller. "She doesn't look right." "Consumption?" Mercer said. She got it on the way. I was bringing her back south because she is too sick to go north. That's convenient. Porter took Ruth's arm and pulled her toward him. The hood fell back. Ruth's face was thin and her skin was gray. If you squinted and didn't look too closely, she might have looked a little like Clara, but when you looked closely, the differences were clear. Porter said slowly, "This isn't her. I promise you. This is the woman I bought at the Greensburg auction. You are lying." Porter let Ruth go so roughly that she fell back onto the wagon bed. He looked at his men. "Look everywhere. She's here somewhere." They ripped the wagon apart, went through the supplies, looked under the driver's bench, and checked every inch of the canvas. They didn't find anything because there was nothing to find. Porter stood in the road, the papers in his hand no longer making sense. He had been paid to stop a certain woman. He had been told it would be easy, and now he was going back to Duncan Fairholme with nothing. "Where is she?" he asked. Mercer said in a calm voice, "I don't know what you're talking about. This is the woman I bought. If she's not the one you want, that's not my problem." Porter moved forward. "Duncan Fairholme will hear about this. I hope he does. Maybe he will tell us why he is bothering law-abiding people over property disputes." It was a tie. Porter knew he had been outsmarted, but he couldn't prove it. If he killed Mercer, he would have to tell Judge Crenshaw why he killed a man who seemed to be innocent. He would have to explain why he had taken a dying woman who was clearly not the fugitive they were looking for if he took Ruth. James Ridley, a former slave catcher and one of Porter's men, had been watching Ruth closely. Over the course of his 15-year career, he had taken part in dozens of captures. He knew how to judge other people's property, and everything about this situation felt off. "Let's question her," Ridley said, pointing to Ruth. Porter knelt next to Ruth, who was still lying in the wagon bed where she had fallen. She was breathing shallowly and irregularly, and her eyes were open but not focused. "Where's Clara?" Porter asked. "What did you do to her?" Ruth's eyes were clearly trying hard to focus on Porter. And then, for some reason, she smiled. "Out," she said softly. "Beyond your reach. Beyond Duncan Fairholme's reach. She is free." "Where?" "I will never tell you." Ruth's smile grew wider, and blood was now visible on her teeth. "You can beat me and torture me, but I'll be dead long before you get any answers. I made sure of that." Porter got it then. This woman had poisoned herself on purpose and taken something that would kill her during this fight. She had turned her own death into a weapon against Duncan's plan. "You dumb woman," Porter said, but his voice wasn't as sure anymore. "You think this helps anyone? Duncan will find her eventually. He always does." "Maybe," Ruth said. Her mouth was now bleeding freely, and the foam that had started to form at the corners of her lips was mixing with it. "Or maybe she'll go to a place where men like you and Duncan Fairholme have no power. Maybe she'll live to be old. Maybe her child will grow up free. Maybe your whole system will fall apart and be remembered as a nightmare that our descendants will have a hard time believing was real." Her breathing was uneven, then it stopped. Then it started again, with a wet rattling sound. "I die knowing I helped destroy something Duncan spent months building. What will you die knowing, Mr. Porter? That you hunted human beings for money? That you served a system designed to crush souls? That you chose cruelty when you could have chosen mercy?" Ruth Chambers took one last breath. Then she died, right there, in the road, with 4 slave catchers standing over her, Isaiah Mercer watching from beside his broken wagon, and the Louisiana sun beating down on a scene that would haunt James Ridley for the rest of his life. For a full minute, Porter stood over Ruth's body without saying a word. After that, he spoke to his men. "We bury her here. We tell Duncan we stopped the wagon, but the woman died before we could question her. We tell him Mercer says it was the woman from the auction, but we couldn't prove it before she died. We tell him the trail is cold." One of the men said, "Duncan will know we failed," Porter said. "Duncan will know exactly what happened. He will know he was outmaneuvered, but he won't be able to prove it. And without proof, he can't do anything." They put Ruth Chambers in a shallow grave next to the road. There was no ceremony or marker, just another black body coming back to Louisiana soil, one of thousands who would never be publicly mourned or officially remembered. Isaiah Mercer didn't show any emotion while watching the burial. He stood alone next to the disturbed earth when it was all over and the men had gotten on their horses and ridden away. He didn't pray because he wasn't religious, but he said Ruth's name out loud 3 times, as if repeating it could somehow honor what she had done. Then he went north as he had planned. He would keep up the lie that he had been trying to get Clara to a free place. He would say that he didn't understand why she had died. He would tell Judge Crenshaw that the property had been damaged while it was being moved, and ask for money to cover his loss. The report was turned down. Judge Crenshaw said that Mercer bought the property as is and took on all the risk. The fact that the minimum bid was 12 cents was taken as proof that the seller knew the property was broken. There would be no payment. In its own twisted way, it was the best legal conclusion. Everyone had done what they were supposed to do. All of the papers were filed correctly. The law worked just as it was supposed to. But a dying woman and a former slave trader looking for redemption had stopped Duncan Fairholme's revenge. In 1868, years later, James Ridley had a religious conversion and told a Methodist minister named Reverend Thomas Hargrove about his past sins. One of those confessions gave a full account of what happened during the interception on that March afternoon in 1853. Ridley talked about Ruth's last words, the blood on her lips, and the fierce intelligence in her dying eyes. He also talked about how she smiled as life left her body, knowing that she had broken Duncan Fairholme's carefully planned system of cruelty. Ridley told the minister, "I have caught more than 200 fugitives in my life. I've seen men and women beg for mercy. I've seen them fight, scream, and pray. But I've never seen anyone choose death as deliberately as Ruth Chambers did. She turned her last breath into an act of defiance. She died free, even though the law said she wasn't. That haunts me more than all the others put together." Reverend Hargrove wrote down Ridley's confession because he knew it was important to history, but he never published it while he was still alive. The confession was in his personal papers until he died in 1902. His daughter, Sarah, found it while going through his things. Not only was she horrified by the content, which was bad enough, but also by what it meant. For 34 years, her father had known about this event but had never told anyone about it, not even historians or journalists. He had kept it to himself, as if documenting evil was enough without actually doing anything about it. Sarah Fletcher did something her father didn't do. She published the confession in 1,903 inches, a small abolitionist magazine that few people read, but she did it. She put it on the record for everyone to see. We know the details of Ruth Chambers' last moments, how she chose to die, and how she smiled as she died because of that publication. She was sure she had ruined Duncan Fairholme's plan. For the next 6 months, Duncan Fairholme looked for Clara. He hired people who were good at catching slaves. He put ads in newspapers in 3 different states. He offered rewards that went from $500 to $2,000. He never saw her. In 1861, just before Louisiana left the Union, Judge Crenshaw died. He took everything he knew about what really happened to the grave. Duncan Fairholme made it through the Civil War, but he lost everything after it. Union soldiers set fire to Bellamont in 1863. Duncan died in 1,872 inches, a boarding house in Mobile, Alabama. He was broke and alone. Years before, his wife Margaret had left him. People never said his brother's name in front of him again. In 1854, Silas Guthrie, the overseer, was found dead in a ditch outside of Greensburg. The official cause of death was drowning by accident. Even though he was found face down in less than 6 inches of water, there were never any charges. Nathaniel Pouet was parish recorder until 1863. When he ran away from Louisiana to escape Union troops, no one ever heard from him again. The receipt found during the courthouse renovations in 1897 had more than just the record of Clara's sale on it. There was a message on the back written by William Fairholme. "To whoever finds this, my name is William Fairholme. I tried to save a woman I loved from my brother's cruelty. I failed her, as I have failed in most things of importance. If you are reading this, know that the greatest evil is not the evil done by wicked men, but the evil permitted by good men who lacked the courage to act. I lacked that courage when it mattered. I pray you will not." The historians who found this message knew right away what it meant. They buried it again and sealed it back into the wall, where it would stay hidden for another 100 years. In 1998, during another renovation, the receipt was found again. This time, it stayed safe. It is now in the Louisiana State Archives. But we still don't know what will happen to Clara. Some historians think she made it to Mexico, where she may have settled in Veracruz, where a group of escaped slaves had already set up a community. Some people think she went to Haiti. Some people think she died at some point during the trip. A genealogist came up with the idea in 2006 that a woman who looked like Clara lived in Illinois in 1870 and went by the name Clara Freeman. She had a daughter who was born in 1853 and was of mixed race. Ruth was the name of the daughter. If the theory is right, then Isaiah Mercer succeeded because Clara lived and built a life in freedom. The rescue that was supposed to fail didn't fail. Duncan's trap, which he worked so hard on, didn't catch anything. But we can't be sure. There are gaps in the historical record. During the Civil War, papers were burned. Memories were intentionally repressed. We have only bits and pieces left: a deed of sale, a receipt, a message hidden in a wall, census records that might be about someone else, and questions that will never be fully answered. The silence of history may constitute a form of response. Maybe the fact that we can't find Clara's path means she really did disappear. She became impossible to follow, and she got what so many enslaved people dreamed of: complete and total freedom from the system that wanted to control every part of their lives. Or maybe she died alone and forgotten, just another victim of a system that ruined millions of lives with bureaucratic efficiency. That 12-cent deal is a symbol of that uncertainty. It was legal, witnessed, and documented in official records, yet it feels deeply wrong in a way that goes beyond the already significant wrong of slavery. The intentional devaluation of a human life, the use of bureaucratic processes to inflict cruelty, and the involvement of judges, clerks, and ordinary citizens in a transaction meant to cause pain. Everyone who was involved made a choice. Duncan chose to get back at them. William chose to take a risk, but it was too late. Isaiah Mercer made the choice to be saved. Judge Crenshaw chose the law over kindness. Ruth Chambers decided to help a stranger by dying. Clara chose to live, no matter what it took. The 7 men who signed the deed of sale as witnesses also chose to take part in something they must have known was very wrong. Their signatures are still on that document, which is kept in archives as proof of their involvement. Their descendants spent generations trying to hide this story so that no one would ask uncomfortable questions about what their ancestors had done, seen, or allowed. But stories like this have a way of coming to light and needing to be told. This mystery shows us that the law itself was the most cruel weapon ever made. It was the system that made horror legal, that let men destroy lives with a signature and a handful of copper coins, and that let a pregnant woman be sold for the price of a loaf of bread. This was done not because anyone thought she was worthless, but to show that those in power could give or take away worth at will. What do you think of this tale? Do you think Clara made it? Do you think she got away? Or did Duncan's cruelty go beyond death and get her anyway? If you like this story and want to read more like it, please leave a comment below, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and share with a friend who likes mysteries. I'll see you in the next video.